The Carolina coast was known for being a hard place to settle. The Spanish tried in 1521 and later the French in 1562, but the elements, insects, and lack of food was too much to overcome. By 1662, Charles II, King of England, found among his royal possessions the Carolinas and gifted the land to 8 worthy men entitled the Lord Proprietors, of which one was Sir John Colleton. The Lord Proprietors, as payment, would give the king 20 marks a year and 1/4 of all the gold and silver found. The Lord Proprietors were told to make laws if needed, but not to take possession of anything as punishment, and to allow for religious freedom. By 1680, a group of mainly Barbados English settlers called Charlestown home. The fertile lands and opportunity for a better life enticed many more settlers to come. In 1682, early English settlers were building log cabins along the rivers of what was at that time called St. Bartholomew's. Large lots near an indigenous village known as the Pon were documented to belong to John Smith and George Wilcox. In the early days, settlers would set huge fires to clear the land so that they could plant corn and to show the indigenous community that they meant to stay. In 1701, William Oswald purchased 90 acres near Pon, and later that year, Captain John Jackson was granted 400 acres on the Pon, also referred to as the Edisto River. By 1706, the land of St. Bartholomew's was split, and part became St. Paul's. Initially, the Native American community welcomed settlers as the goods they brought to trade made their lives much easier. However, there was a continuous clash over culture, as the settlers saw life very differently than the indigenous people. Certain areas of contention included debt repayment, land ownership, family member roles, and how crimes were to be handled. By 1714, Captain John Jackson had a bridge built over the river. The bridge may have been to aid with trade and provide an easy way for settlers to travel to Charleston. However, on the Good Friday of 1715, all the differences and small acts of violence between the settlers and indigenous tribes came to a head, and a massacre unlike any before occurred, after which the remaining settlers ran for the protection of Charleston's walls. During the massacre, settlers' homes and the Jackson Bridge were burnt. After a new alliance was made with the Cherokee Indians and the Yamasee, a collection of tribes, were driven out, settlers again went out to farm and make homes for themselves. Only this time the settlers chose to build near larger rivers, like that of the Edisto near the Pon village. This was done so if an uprising ever occurred again, the settlers would be able to use the river as a means of escape. As a result, in 1725, the chapel of Pon was built to allow the settlers a place of worship. Then, a few years later, in 1728, Reverend Archibald Stobo came to the area and built the Bethel Presbyterian Church. While Reverend Nathaniel Osborne was a missionary in the area as early as 1713, it wasn't until 1734 that John Wesley came to the area and preached at the then wooden Pon Chapel of Ease. By 1735, the area near the Pon village was recognized as the settlement of Jacksonboro. By 1780, there was 113 lots designated along the river and roads named King's Market and Boundary. During this time, Jacksonboro included families with the surnames of Riley, Kennedy, Cox, Smith, Howell, Wright, Rhodes, Simmons, Glover, Parker, Davis, Allen, Johnson, Roberts, Reynolds, Fishburne, Sanders, and Hart. The settlement of Jacksonboro also had a tavern on the outskirts of town called Allen's. Jacksonboro was a very popular and prosperous area. In 1744, it had the first free school. It was also one of the first places to have an early racetrack, Masonic lodge, and Episcopal and Presbyterian churches. In fact, prior to the Revolutionary War, raising blooded horses was quite a thing to do. All classes of the community would attend the horse races, schools would be dismissed, and judges would be unwilling to hold court. Bets were placed in which people would win money, horses, or even property. In 1753, the Pompon Chapel of Ease wood building was replaced with the brick structure, part of which still exists today. During the Revolutionary War, the Battle of Pompon occurred on March 20th, 1780, in which a skirmish occurred between William Washington and Tarleton. The following year, on July 8, 1781, another fight broke out at Horseshoe between Colonel Isaac Haynes and Frazier's men. Colonel Isaac Hayne lived at his plantation in Jacksonboro, known as Hayne Hall. Near the end of the Revolutionary War, Isaac Hayne was captured by one of Frazier's men and then wrongly executed by the British. Now known as a beloved martyr of the war, even today people still come to Jacksonboro to visit his family cemetery and to pay their respects. While newspapers began to appear in Charleston in the mid-1700s, in Jacksonboro, Peter Timothy started the Southern Carolina Gazette, which was published in 1782 near Parker's Ferry. It was the first publication outside of Charleston. The Jacksonboro Press also came into existence and published a list of laws, the speech of Governor Rutledge in 1782, and the proclamation of 1782 in which Governor Matthews recommended enforcements for the laws. Between 1788 and 1832, the area remained popular and was the county seat for Colleton County. This meant people in the surrounding areas would be housed in the jail of Jacksonboro, and surrounding settlers would come to Jacksonboro for court. Jacksonboro's most notable claim to fame occurred during the Revolutionary War, when Nathanael Greene had the then Charleston state capital moved to Jacksonboro. This was done to keep the political men safe and allow meetings to still occur. The General Assembly would meet in the Jacksonboro Masonic Lodge and the tavern. At that time, Allen's Tavern was owned by Peter DuBose. Peter even removed a wall in the tavern so that more men could occupy the building. Jacksonboro, South Carolina, remained the state's provisional capital from January to February 1782. During this time, there was a story of Rollins Lowndes. He was a wealthy rice planter who owned Horseshoe Plantation. He was a representative of St. Bartholomew's from 1751 until the end of the war. He was also a delegate at the Jacksonboro Assembly. At one of the meetings, he arrived late due to the enemy stealing his horses. In order to travel to Jacksonboro, he hitched up his oxen to his wagon. However, the travel took longer than expected as the oxen refused to walk in a straight line. Once the Revolutionary War ended, land once belonging to an unpopular loyalist named Thomas Boone, the former South Carolina governor, was given to Nathaniel Greene. While Nathaniel Greene never lived on the land, it did become known as Greene's Meadow. Eventually, in 1802, the sheriff sold the land to Andrew Burnett and Felix Worley, and the area became known as Forlorn Hope. However, today the area is most known because of the historical marker and road adjacent to it, which describes the Patriot victory at Parker's Ferry between Francis Marion and Fraser's men, in which some believe was retribution after Hayne's unjust death. In the spring of 1791, George Washington came to stay in Jacksonboro on his way from Charleston to Savannah. Today, if you drive down Parker's Ferry, you are taking the same route that he did. Other notable people who are now laid to rest in Jacksonboro include Mr. and Mrs. S. Vadier, French immigrants and philanthropist. And in the same graveyard, Captain John Hubert Dent, the commander of the Ironside. After the Revolutionary War, O'Brien Smith came to the area and inherited the castle and the hill plantation. He was the captain of the South Carolina Volunteers Militia and was also important in establishing public schools. He actually hosted George Washington in his home during George Washington's Southern tour. Smith was a House representative and a senator when he died in office in 1811. Beside Smith at the Burnt Chapel is Smith's friend, Judge Burke. Burke believed in justice for all. He strongly opposed the confiscation of Tory land. Besides his compassion for his fellow man, the judge was also known to have a great sense of humor. One of these instances involves Smith sending a donkey for the judge to ride to court, after which the judge told Smith the jackass was a sorry excuse for a horse. In another instance, during a duel, the judge fumbled and broke the pistol of Aaron Burr. Luckily, the incident was so funny the duel never occurred. However, in his will to amend for his actions, the judge left Burr his case of pistols. After the Revolutionary War, Jacksonboro prospered from Carolina gold rice as it brought the area wealth. News articles of the day talk of grand 4th of July celebrations and social events, and of course, horse races. As far as plantations in Jacksonboro, I have read of Frederick Plantation, Oak Lawn Plantation, the Rice Hope Plantation, which was rebuilt in 1872 after being burnt by Sherman, Horseshoe Plantation, which was supposedly 1/4 mile down the street from Bethel, the Hayne Hall Plantation of Isaac Haynes, which burnt down in 1924, and the Woodford Plantation on Featherbed Road, where Isaac Hayne was captured. In addition, Parker Ferry Road is home to 3 historical plantations. By 1817, an act of legislature changed the county seat from Jacksonboro to Walterboro. However, The move from Jacksonboro to Walterboro was gradual as funding for construction of a new courthouse and jail took time. The last term of court held in Jacksonboro was the spring of 1812. The reason for moving was due to Walterboro being seen as a healthier environment. This may have been due to better water drainage, cleaner springs, and less mosquitoes. In the request for the seat to be changed, it states Jacksonboro is a thinly settled, sickly part of the district, and necessary accommodations are hard to find. Even plantation owners only stay in the area for a few months a year. In 1823, the Jacksonboro Post Office was built, and in 1826, the Mills map still shows the old courthouse and jail of Jacksonboro standing. Eventually, the businesses moved from Jacksonboro to Walterboro around the courthouse. In 1859, the old village of Jacksonboro was given new life with the construction of the railroad which ran between Charleston and Savannah. However, it never reached the size or popularity of other places along the railroad. Still, in 1868, under an act of General Assembly, the county was divided into townships, and Jacksonboro was included. Then, in 1886, Pon Pon Phosphate Works caused the area to grow slightly, and a few stores emerged. On November 28, 1892, Jacksonboro changed its name to appear shorter. In conclusion, today, while little remains, the town is still home to 412 people. If you visit, I recommend first having frog legs at Ace Basin Fish Camp. Second, exploring the dirt roads, of which there are many. Third, visiting the Bethel Church Historical Site. Number 4, riding down Parker's Ferry Road to the Pon Pon Chapel that is also called the Burnt Church. 5, fish or just sit on the dock located on the Hope Plantation Road. 6, walk the Jacksonboro Nature Trail. 7, visit the Bluefield Shooting Club. 9, stop at the old church off of the main street. According to the property taxes, the church was last sold by Fraser Wiley to the Wesleyan CME Church on January 8, 1983 for $3. Number 9, float down the Edisto River. And number 10, while Wheeltown community is actually a part of Charleston and not Jacksonboro, on the third Saturday of every May, they have a Parker's Ferry Parade, which draws around 500 people. In addition, you can take your kids to the Parker's Ferry Playground, which is also in Wheelstown and was built in 2003. I hope you enjoyed this video and it inspires you to go to Jacksonboro, South Carolina. If you did, please like it, and as always, thanks for watching.